Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the new moon in Aries on the 16th of April at 1:57 AM Universal Time, which translates as 2:57 AM here in the UK because the clocks are forward for the summer months. And I'll be outlining some of the key themes that this new moon highlights to us. But before I do that, I just want to explain, as I always do, that astrology doesn't control our lives in any way, shape or form. It's more about understanding what's going on in the collective unconscious, what the influences and the themes that they highlight to us, and how we can make best use of the energies available to us in order to further empower ourselves and to come from, when things are happening around us, to learn to be in a position where we come from a place of responsiveness rather than reactiveness. Now, in terms of the new moon itself, it's the first one of the new astrological cycle, and is therefore the first new moon for us to initiate new beginnings as such. However, we don't have to wait for a new moon to occur for us to be starting new beginnings. We can do that at any point, but new moons are a particularly potent time for new beginnings. It's where a seed of a new idea is sown as such. Now, ordinarily, when we think of new moons, we think of what can they do for us as such, or what will happen in our lives. But maybe a better way of looking at it is how can we learn to better embody the energies of the sign the new moon is taking place in. And with this being in Aries, we're looking at what are the qualities associated with Aries that we want to cultivate, and potentially what are the shadow qualities of it that we express at the moment that we need to address and transform it into the positive. Because the energy of Aries is within every single one of us. It's not something that you have to have the sun in Aries in order for us to connect with it. We all have Aries somewhere in our chart, so we'll therefore all experience it differently. But we all have that part of the cycle. It's about initiating new beginnings. That has that kind of drive, that need to assert yourself, the need to pursue a goal of sorts, and need to take action in order for that to happen. But wherever Aries appears in our chart, this is where this will be taking place. But collectively, it's in the first house. It's about asserting ourselves, asserting our sense of self-identity. But it's learning to find the right balance with assertiveness. Because if assertiveness isn't channeled properly, or isn't directed towards a specific goal, then it mutates into anger, where this is anger in its destructive form. So it's not directed properly. It's not focused on the point or the thing that's caused or triggered the anger. Because usually anger it can be used constructively, but we need to make sure we don't project it onto other people. It's important that we kind of suck out the negative destructive energy from it first, so that it's pure energy used to assert ourselves, to stand our own ground and make sure that we're not trodden on, to assert our own boundaries with people so that they know that where the line in the sand is for us, and the potential consequences if they try and cross that line. So Aries is about asserting the self and making it clear that we demand self-respect, we want people to respect us, and we're not particularly going to tolerate if someone tries to walk all over us. This doesn't mean that we become arrogant or egotistic. Aries is all about that pioneering action. It's that fresh energy, that drive that motivates us towards a new goal. And if we're someone who struggles to assert ourselves or struggles to pursue our goals, then the new moon in Aries is an opportunity to utilise the energy present to develop that assertiveness, or to set intentions around developing greater assertiveness, so we don't just roll over when people try and push against us or try to push us around. But also we need to make sure that we don't just fly off the handle and have an explosive burst of anger, which could burn anyone, and it could just be an impulsive anger. So we need to look at both sides here. So for some of us, we may struggle with assertiveness and always allow ourselves to be manipulated, pushed around, whilst other people may be full of fiery anger, or very impulsive and quick to anger, and when something happens that annoys them, fly off the handle straight away. So it's finding that middle ground where we have the courage to assert ourselves, and to remain true to who we are and assert that authentic sense of self-identity. But at the same time, we don't just fly off the handle or become irrationally angry when something gets on our nerves or triggers something. We need to understand why it is that we're getting angry about something as well, because it could be that whatever's happened is actually perfectly innocuous, but we're responding from something else that's similar. So we need to understand our own triggers for anger. We need to understand what the causes are and make sure we don't displace the anger onto other people. Because quite a common pattern with a lot of us is that we feel angry about something, but we don't feel like we can do anything about the cause of the anger, so we end up displacing it onto other people who have nothing to do with the thing that's actually causing us anger, and anger then perpetuates. That person's probably going to feel hurt, then angry, and then they may project it onto someone else. So we need to make sure we don't set off a chain reaction of anger and aggression towards one another. So when we do feel that sense of hurt or that anger and the need to assert ourselves, is before we unleash it, we need to remember to take a breath. Because remember, another quality of Aries is objectivity. But if we just get drawn in by the heat and we ignore the light side of it, then we're just going to flip out and we're not going to be particularly reasonable. So it's important that we remember to take that breath as well and to pause for a moment to make sure that we don't just unleash a tirade of anger on someone, that we nullify the anger side, and so we're just left with the energy of it, and then use that to assert ourselves and make it clear why something isn't okay with us and why we're not prepared to tolerate it, but to not flip out and hurt the other person in the process. I mean, obviously, if we're setting boundaries, some people aren't going to like that because they're not comfortable with, they don't like people setting boundaries and making it clear they're not going to tolerate certain behaviour because they're used to getting away with stuff. So Aries, part of Aries is about setting those healthy boundaries with people, making it clear where our line is and what we're not going to tolerate. But it doesn't mean that we become self-absorbed at the same time, or we don't become egotistic or impulsive. We need to make sure that we keep the ego in check at all times here. So with Aries being the rebirth of the ego in its new form, we need to make sure that the ego then doesn't take over everything and starts acting irrationally or starts pushing in all kinds of directions. So we may also decide that we need to look at what goals are we setting for ourselves, because up until just before the new moon we've had a Mercury retrograde, so it's been a time of reflection of trying to understand our relationship with Aryan energy in the first place. So with the new moon happening hot on the tails of the end of the retrograde, this is a good time for us to implement all the information or all the insights we've gained about our relationship with assertiveness, our ability to take action, our ability to remain motivated and to direct our actions and desires down constructive channels, and to apply these insights with the new moon, because it's an opportunity for us to really start those new beginnings, to elevate the functioning of Aries in our consciousness, so we have that courage to take action when we know it needs to be done. We don't just procrastinate or hang back in fear. It's also, Aries is all about that courage to take action in the face of the unknown. It's one of the things that's quite strongly in human condition is the need to have more information before we take action. But Aries being the first sign in zodiacs reminds us that we can't know everything in advance. We know what we know at this point, and if we want anything to happen, we have to take action. We have to make things happen ourselves. No planetary alignment, no magic's going to make things happen unless we take action to begin with. So Aries reminds us that all things start off with action. If we want something new to happen, we have to change the actions that we've been doing so far, so that they're more likely to help manifest this new goal we set that's different to what we've done before. So Aries is also about that courage. So if we struggle with courage, and we always feel like we have to get more information, then the new moon may be a time where we decide that, right, come what may, we're going to learn to make things happen. We're going to learn to take that action despite the fact that we're facing our fears at this point, and we fear the unknown, or we have certain doubts and uncertainties. But Aries lends us that courage to take the action regardless of those fears. It's not action that happens after we've looked at the fear, it's action taken in the face of fear. Because more often than not, the fears are actually unfounded. We're usually a lot stronger than we give ourselves credit for, but we forget that. We remember the things where we struggled with, and we forget to count our successes that happened because we took action. So courage is something that comes about through practice. It doesn't just, you can't just make it magically appear. This isn't like heroic courage, like facing up to something massive. It's more like ordinary or everyday courage. It's the willingness to face that discomfort that uncertainty causes us and take the action regardless, and to believe that no matter what challenges come to us, we have what it takes to push through those challenges and keep things going. Now, obviously, we need to make sure that the actions we're taking are guided by wisdom, they're not just impulsive. But if we remember to stay true to who we are and to separate our actions from our sense of self-identity, so we don't feel like we have to be doing something in order to be someone, if we can separate our consciousness from the actions as such, or make sure that we know that, or we have that self-awareness before we take any action, so that we can make sure our actions are guided by wisdom. Now, the ruler of this new moon, Mars, is up in Capricorn at the moment, and as such, the fact that Mars is in Capricorn, which is a period where the action focus of Mars needs to be brought under discipline, self-control and patience, this may well help us in terms of channeling our actions and desires constructively, because Mars in Capricorn is reminding us to be patient with things, to make sure that we're disciplined in our actions, because we just try and pursue things blindly or pursue things impulsively, the innate energy of Capricorn kind of acts like a limitation or restriction on that, until the point where the Mars function, which is our actions and desires, is sufficiently refined enough that we're taking actions that are guided by wisdom and aligned with karmic law. So we're not just doing something that's going to cause us karma, we're taking actions that are like right action, they're guided by wisdom, not egoic impulse. And this then means that when we're making these new beginnings for ourselves or for one another, the actions are guided by wisdom and the awareness that actions have consequences, so we need to make sure that they're not impulsive and taken at the cost of anyone else. They need to be obviously beneficial for ourselves, but also done in a way that isn't going to cause harm to someone else. Now, the new moon is also conjunct Uranus, though not quite exact, but very close. And this is the last time that the Sun and Uranus, for example, will be conjunct one another in Aries for about 77 years, because we'll come to the end of the Uranus transit through Aries, and next month Uranus will move on into Taurus. Uranus will backtrack into Aries again. However, by the time the Sun is swept around to Aries once again, Uranus would have already moved on from there. So Uranus, over the past 7 years, has been trying to help us strengthen or get in touch with the Aries angel, get in touch with the deeper levels of it. It's been reminding us that Uranus deals with things like humanitarianism, the future, the wider collective and the collective unconscious, and how we're interconnected with it. But its passage through Aries has also been reminding us that if we want these ideals to manifest, if we want any kind of humanitarian goal to happen, if we want to achieve any kind of world peace, which is a very cliche goal, but it's one that a lot of people claim to want, then we have to create that within ourselves first. We have to transform ourselves in order to become agents of that change, and then we have to make sure our actions are conducive to creating these humanitarian conditions, to make sure our actions are done with the wider perspective of the community included. So we're not just, it's Uranus is the awakener, but often this comes through chaos if we're not sufficiently aware or we have a major resistance to change. Because one of the key themes of Uranus is change, the fact that everything around us is impermanent, is constantly changing, even from day to day. The changes may not be immediately obvious, but subtle changes are constantly happening, and we see this through the natural cycle of the zodiac, through the cycle of the seasons. Uranus reminds us of the impermanence of things. It also reminds us to look to the future, or identify what kind of future we want to create, and then work in the now in order to manifest it. And through Aries, it's been about reawakening that pioneering spirit within us, to recognise the fact that there are a lot of challenges around us, there's a lot of different crises happening, but if we learn to embrace that pioneering spirit, that willingness to embrace the unknown and to take action despite not knowing the outcome, then we can significantly empower ourselves and become those agents of change. But we have to become willing to embrace change first, and we also need to understand the deeper levels of our sense of who we are, because Aries is that self-awareness, as I said at the beginning. It's that initial spark of understanding of who we are, and that sense of identity. It's the I am consciousness, and whatever words we place after the words I am have immense power over our sense of identity and what we believe we can and can't do. So Uranus has been awakening that spirit within us, within every single one of us. Some of us may be more resistant to it than others, so may have experienced more chaos as a result. But if we learn to take on board the lessons of Uranus, we prepare to embrace change and allow change to unfold in our lives, then things can happen in a much more peaceful or leisurely way. By embracing change and listening to our intuition, we open ourselves up to the changes. We recognise the wisdom of making changes, and we just go with the flow of things now, rather than trying to cling to what we've been doing out of fear of the unknown or out of fear of change. If we can learn to embrace our instincts, embrace our intuition, and make the changes necessary through action, even if it brings up old fears or doubts about and uncertainty. If we embrace the process, we empower ourselves to become those agents of change, people who have the capacity to bring about greater peace or a greater understanding of how we're interconnected, but also the necessity of helping ourselves in order to help others. It's through liberating the self and empowering the self that we create the tools within us which we can then share with one another and help other people who are struggling to see how they can empower themselves. But it all starts with being willing to work on ourselves. We can't expect other people to do the work for us. We have to have the courage to do it ourselves. So, but as I said at the start, all of this is just a series of potentials unless we take action on it. Otherwise, they're just opportunities that pass us by. It doesn't mean that they can never come around again, but the whole point of opportunities is that they're there for us to take if we choose to. If we choose to just sit by and let life pass us by, then we have only ourselves to look at for that. Each and every one of us is responsible for how our lives unfold, and we're responsible for bringing our minds into the right place so that they serve as an ally rather than as our enemy. Because the mind is a very powerful thing. It can either build us up through positive thinking and positive self-worth, or it can also destroy us through constant negative thinking and self-criticism. So we have to bring our minds into balance. The astrology itself isn't going to do this for us. This is where things like spiritual practice come in, like meditation, to help us understand what our minds are doing, like basic self-care, like exercise, which helps us to ground out, to keep ourselves strong. And exercise, especially aerobic exercise and various other things like yoga, have been known to help influence the mind itself. It's not just a one-way street. They say mind over matter, but the body can also influence the mind by changing the chemistry in the body, which flows into the mind and can help balance it out again. But we have to take the actions, we have to make the changes in order for any of this to happen. Otherwise, new moon just passes us by and nothing new happens. So if we want anything to happen, we have to take the action. But if we want to understand things deeper, astrology can give us an awareness, but doesn't really change anything. It's through being prepared to engage in some kind of spiritual practice, to like mindfulness, to calm the mind down and learn to turn it into an ally rather than a liability. And this then empowers us to take actions which will make us strong individuals, that will bring us that freedom that we all aim to want, but often we decide not to do it because we don't want to take the responsibility for it. If we take responsibility for our minds, we unlock that freedom, we enable ourselves to become better individuals or to do more with our lives, and we then can become examples for others, as long as we're serving as positive role models and taking actions which are constructive, are empowering, but aren't also going to cause any negative reactions towards other people or to create karma for ourselves. If we use the awareness of Aries to become, or if we develop the self-awareness of Aries to make sure that our actions are the correct ones to take, we then serve as positive role models for other people. But if we don't do that, then nothing is going to change. So, that's a useful guide for the new moon in Aries. As I said in the last video I made, we have a website up now, so I'll post links down below in the description for the website and the Facebook page. You can see what else we do at the Magdalene Centre, because it's certainly not all about astrology at all. This is just one small part of it. But I'll post links there so you can see what else we do. And you can see some of the other activities like mantra meditation, which are the spiritual tools that help us to utilise the astrology constructively. Because astrology in and of itself doesn't change anything, it just gives us that framework or concept. It's through things like spiritual discipline and like meditation that we can change the way our minds are wired, so that we are prepared to take the actions, and we work more constructively with the astrology, more consciously with it. So may the new moon in Aries bring you many opportunities, and may you achieve much growth from it. Take care, be blessed.